This is the last talk in Dee's series in Sex and Consciousness Month. And it may seem like a strange topic because what we're going to talk about is nature and about whales in particular. But what we're talking about is about intimacy. We're talking about our capacity for openness, for relating, to how deep that can go. And we're going to think about it in a way far an extension of what we would ordinarily think about. We're going to apply it to nature and see how much intimacy we can cultivate with a non-human world. In particular, we're going to look at the great whales. So the question, the kind of guiding question is really important, is how deeply can we attune ourselves to another way of being in the world, a non-human way of being? And that's a question that has been a kind of anthropomorphic minefield in philosophical and scientific circles. In fact, it's been pretty much, the line has been that you can't really relate that much at all. It's just projection. And so that, we're definitely going to challenge that. And the animal I've chosen are the great whales, dolphins as well, but the whales, the order Cetacea, the cetaceans. Part of the reason I chose the choice is because most of us have very little familiarity with whales. I mean, no personal familiarity. We may see them as a distant fluke on the horizon, or we've seen them in National Geographic specials. So to begin to cultivate this extension that we're after, there are sort of three pieces that are really important. There's many more pieces, but there's three pieces we're going to get into in this talk. The first piece is the science piece. It's the product of careful observation, of using your reason and intelligence to deduce things. So that's the kind of ground from which we begin. But then the next piece is the empathy piece. And this is a very primordial human, and actually I would say mammalian capacity, because everything that happens in empathy is supported by a mammalian brain. So, and that has to do with the way in which we can relate to another body, the emotions, the feelings of being a body. And out of empathy, there's something very unique, which we would call imagination. That's a human capacity, and it may be a capacity in other species as well, but it's certainly a human one. So that's the kind of third piece. And there's a quote I like. It was William Blake. He said, the greater the, what was this quote? It was great. He said, the greater the power of imagination, the wider the circle of here. So that's what we're going to try to do now. We're going to try to create a wider circle of here around the great whales. It's important as much as possible to kind of give yourself over to this. I mean, you'll be reassured at the beginning because there's good science, but at a certain point it kind of takes a more speculative turn. And there are some visualizations where I'll ask you to close your eyes and just listen to the sounds. There's a lot of sound in this, especially at the end, a lot. And give yourself over to the feelings that the sounds generate, and try to stretch your, what I would call your embodied imaginations out. So not just, try to feel the things I'm talking about, try to feel them as sensations, and notice where they're happening in your body. And I'll probably ask you about it. So occasionally I'll stop the flow and I'll ask you about this and that. Because one of the things I'm playing with is this idea that we have this kind of embodied imaginative capacity that's much, much, much wider than we generally use and think of, and we can begin to kind of trigger it. And so this is a way to kind of try to induce some of those effects. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to try to turn you into a little bit of whale. Not a lot, maybe 1/100th whale. So maybe a little gray patch, a little rubbery gray patch behind the ear, a single webbed finger by the end. So we'll start with a visualization. So everybody close your eyes. So picture the ocean. Imagine your human self slip into the water naked. Hold your breath. Sink down. Imagine your body expand with a comforting layer of fat. Imagine it lengthen. Feel each vertebrae click as your spine draws up and back. A little shiver as you shimmy out of your pelvic girdle. Legs and hips set adrift. In their place, you sprout a broad triangular fluke, which you force down now in a long muscular undulation that drives you forward through the water. Your neck thickens. As your face moves out to meet the sea, you take a breath and then roll down, snapping your tail. A luxurious full-body whip. I'll say that again, a luxurious full-body whip. Imagine your arms pressed to your sides and then undulate. Feel the power in your tail, the way it opens your ass. You are one long piece of undulating muscle plunging towards the sea floor. As you descend, the pressure begins to seal the outline of your body so that you feel swaddled, but also sleek, sleekly efficient and contained and directed. Dropping down now like a submarine, top-heavy and fearless, the feeling is exhilarating. Your grin is huge. It extends back all the way to the middle of your body. Huge whale smile. Down into the dark you go. The fearless, top-heavy whale human, sealed in by the pressure. As the lights from above fade, new lights gutter in your head. Soon the lights will turn to sound, and the sound will light the dark, and these are some of the things you feel, some of the things you know. Actually, that was a sperm whale you just imagined yourselves into. You can open your eyes. Moby Dick, the famous Moby Dick, depicted here in a famous print by Rockwell Kent. The sound, it's a simulation of a whale's heartbeat. A sperm whale's heart weighs 277 pounds, which is the size of two people. It's thought to beat 6 to 8 times a minute when diving, which is actually a lot slower than what we're hearing now, so very slow heartbeat. So the question is, what would it be like to possess such a heart, to have it thump hugely and slowly in your chest, to undulate kilometers down under the surface, the incredible pressure on your eyes, the water coursing through your barred teeth. Again, as I mentioned, in scientific and philosophical circles, you're not at all allowed to ask this question, this disorderly speculation. But I think it's a very legitimate topic of inquiry, and I'll give you a little bit of context around that. This is my main book. This was about some of the familiar and less familiar states of consciousness that we all move through over a 24-hour day. Some of them are quite rare. And it was about the neurobiology that supported them, but it was a lot about what is it like to be in a dream? What is it like to be alert? What is it like to be in a meditative trance? It was my attempt to try to describe the phenomenology, the inner experience in a kind of imaginative way. So when I finished that project, I kind of was looking around for what I would do next, and I kind of thought about animals, about which I have strong feelings and I love. And I thought, is there any way I can know anything about what it's like to be a non-human animal? And of course, right away, all the anthropomorphic flags go up. That's impossible. That's ridiculous. This is hopeless human projection. But in other ways, it's a very good time to be talking about this, because the culture around talking about animal consciousness has really shifted dramatically in the past 30 years, 20 years. 30 years ago, if you were to introduce this question, you would have been laughed out of the room. This was at the tail end of the behaviorist reign in psychology, which really looked at the question of animals. It was just like, it wasn't interesting whether they had experience. They were kind of impulse machines. They moved forward, they moved back. It was like the question of inner experience wasn't even on the table. But now that's begun to change. You had a whole revolution in cognitive psychology. And now within the animal world, that means a lot of research on what you might call the kind of contour within which an animal's experience happens, the outer contours. So learning, memory, perception, all these sort of abstract qualities about how it operates. But even so, zero discussion about the texture of the animal's lived experience, but what it's like to be a bat. This is Thomas Nagel's. He wrote a famous, or a whale. He wrote a famous paper in the 70s, and the paper basically said, look, and this was really advanced for his time. He said, I don't doubt that animals have some kind of inner experience. A bat, an echolocating weird bat floating around with its interesting sensory abilities, has some experience of the world. It's just that there's no way we can know anything about that experience. It's just hopeless human projection. So that's the piece that I'm really taking issue with.